Good afternoon. Welcome to Cool Springs. Today is Wednesday, September the 3rd, 2025, and this is our series Life Lessons. And our life lesson today is part Bible devotional and part modern day because the Bible speaks to life in all aspects. In the book of Exodus, Moses has been raised as a prince of Egypt. He knows he's Hebrew. He knows enough about his family story to know that his mother and his sister and his adoptive mother, Pharaoh's daughter, all worked together to save him from Pharaoh's edict that all Hebrew boys who were newborns were to be put to death because the Egyptians feared that those boys would grow up to become men and would be so numerous that they might attack the Egyptians. It was an unfounded fear. But they had that fear, and so all the boys were supposed to be put to death. Moses' mother, Yoshebel, came up with a plan. She came up with a way to follow Pharaoh's order to the letter of the law, but not necessarily to the spirit of the law. Pharaoh at first had ordered the midwives, who were giving assistance to Hebrew women having children, to see when the baby came out, is it a girl or a boy? If it's a girl, let her live, because that way we can have more slaves and more labor. But if it's a boy, you're to kill the boy the minute he comes out of the womb. The midwives disobeyed Pharaoh's order. He found out about it, and he called them to account. And they lied and said, well, look, these women are not like the Egyptian women. These women have the babies so quickly that they're already here before we can get to them to do anything at the birth. So they told a lie, and Pharaoh didn't execute them for it. He didn't imprison them. No, the Bible records the fact that they were rewarded for disobeying Pharaoh's very clear communication that he wanted those boys killed. But Moses' mother had hid him as a baby, and then Pharaoh had turned to the idea of, okay, ordering the midwives to do it didn't work, so I'll be cruel, beyond cruel. I'll order the Hebrew parents themselves to toss their baby boys into the Nile River. That way, they're personally responsible for either obeying or disobeying Pharaoh in taking the life of their own infants. Pharaoh said, pitch them in the river. What he intended with this communication was that the babies would die by drowning. You take a newborn infant and you throw them into any sort of body of water. They have no swimming ability. They have no buoyancy to stay afloat on their own. What's going to happen? They're going to sink, ingest water, and drown. And forcing the parents to be the ones to execute their own children, to take their own children's lives, was extremely cruel. But it was a case of, if you don't obey Pharaoh's order, Pharaoh can have you put to death. But Moses' mother came up with a way. Yes, she did pitch her baby boy into the Nile River. But before she pitched him into the river, there was nothing in Pharaoh's communication that says you're forbidden to put him in something that floats, just to give him at least some chance of living. She took a basket and she put a waterproofing material, the biblical name for it is pitch. So she pitched the basket before she put baby Moses in there and then pitched him into the river. She provided a waterproof, able to float device for this infant child to have at least some chance of surviving. Pharaoh can't say she didn't obey orders. She pitched him into the river. But first, she did everything she could to protect him. Not just by pitching him into the river, because what's going to happen? It's going to float away. Again, helpless baby, lying there in the basket, might be safe from drowning, but what's going to happen? There are wild animals in the river that could come and tip that basket over and harm or devour the child could starve to death. There's no food for the child to be able to take in the basket. But Yoshebel, Moses' mother, had scouted things out. She had planned for her baby to have a chance at life. She put him in the river in a waterproof basket upstream from where she and a lot of other people knew that Pharaoh's daughter, who was childless and who had lost her husband, was known to go with her servant girls and bathe. And sure enough, the basket floats straight down to where Pharaoh's daughter is at. And she spies the basket. And she sends for her servants to go and get the basket. And when she sees what's in the basket, her desire to take care of a child, to have a child of her own. She's not dumb. She knows this baby's in the river because of my father's edict. But she's willing to risk Pharaoh's wrath, and she adopts this baby. And so there's a conspiracy of silence between Pharaoh's daughter, who knows, okay, I'm disobeying my father's order, and I'm taking in to my own home the baby boy of some of our slaves. But I love enough to do this. Miriam, the 12-year-old daughter, Moses' older sister, who's the one who's been trusted, see what happens to the child. Yoshebel can't stay at the river to watch herself. She's an adult slave. She's going to get missed if she doesn't show up for work. But nobody's looking for her 12-year-old daughter. So in order to have a chance to save one baby, she's got to risk the safety of the other child. Miriam's out there in the swamp along the river where there are wild animals. There are crocodiles, there are snakes. We're not just talking mosquitoes and bugs. We're talking about animals that could kill Miriam. But she's willing to risk her own safety so that she can ease her mother and father's minds and let them know, this is what happened. I followed the basket and I saw Pharaoh's daughter take the baby, and then I stepped out and asked Pharaoh's daughter, would you like me to get a woman to nurse the child? Because after all, Pharaoh's daughter hasn't recently had a baby. She has no milk. And formula and bottle feeding are many centuries away from being invented. She's going to have to go find a woman who has recently given birth, who is producing milk. Pharaoh's daughter agrees to let her do it. Pharaoh's daughter conveniently chooses not to ask. You see, our topic today is communication issues. Sometimes we say something and we think we've made it clear, but other people misunderstand it. It may be somebody we work with. It might be a spouse. It might be your child, or if you're the child, it might be a parent. And we think we've clearly indicated and communicated what we wanted, but the other person doesn't hear it the way we meant it. But sometimes we choose not to ask questions because we don't want the answer. Pharaoh's daughter did not ask Miriam, what are you doing here? You're a 12-year-old Hebrew girl. You're out here at the Nile River. It's very swampy. It's very dangerous. Where did you come from? What are you doing here? She doesn't want to know the answer because she's smart enough to realize this girl is somehow connected to this baby that's floating in the river. And Pharaoh's daughter wants the baby. So she doesn't want to have too much of the wrong information in case her father starts asking too many questions. No, she just agrees to go let the girl get a wet nurse. And sure enough, Miriam brings back Yoshebel, and the two adult women make an agreement. You take the child and nurse him until he's old enough to be weaned. I'll pay you to do it. Yoshebel has risked her son's life and her daughter's life in an effort to save him, not knowing if this was going to work at all. or not. Now she's hearing that Pharaoh's daughter, the princess of Egypt, is going to pay her to keep her own child in her home, at least for a while. Jochebed's just become the foster parent of her own baby boy. The good news is her boy's going to live. The bad news is she's going to get a couple of years with him while he's being raised up to be old enough to eat on his own, about 3 years of age. She's going to love him, and she's going to have to give him up to another woman to finish raising him. But his life is going to be spared. So she's willing to be the foster mother to her own baby and then hand him over to somebody else, where she'll lose the daily contact, where, for all she knows, he'll be raised up to be an Egyptian who continues to enslave her and everybody else that she knows. But the women kept each other's secrets. Moses is raised up. He knows he's Hebrew. As an adult man one day, raised as a prince of Egypt, he sees an Egyptian abusing, bullying one of the Hebrew slaves. And he intervenes. And he didn't mean to kill the Egyptian. He's just trying to break up the problem. But he accidentally killed the Egyptian. He thought he could cover up the fact that he had killed an Egyptian. He thought his own people would understand, hey, you've been spared from being a slave, that you're here to help us. But the next day, 2 Hebrews were fighting. And he broke up that argument. And the one who was in the wrong said to Moses, are you going to kill me like you did that Egyptian? Now Moses knows, I thought I'd kept it a secret, but word is going to get back to Pharaoh, and so Moses flees out of fear, leaves Egypt. He had a communication issue. He thought his fellow Hebrews would understand that his life had been spared as a baby so that he could grow up to look out for their interests, because after all, that's what he was doing when he broke up the fight between the Egyptian and an Israelite, and the Egyptian accidentally died in the process. Moses had a communication problem that caused him to run away from Egypt. He's going to be gone for the next 40 years. Can't be a prince of Egypt anymore, can't be one of Pharaoh's mighty warriors and helping him govern the nation. No. He has to spend 40 years in the desert of Midian, where he's going to get married, and he's going to work for his father-in-law as a shepherd. Now that's quite a come down from being a prince of Egypt to being a Bedouin shepherd. But God wasn't finished with Moses yet. So there are biblical examples of sometimes when people communicate and either the communication doesn't go through the way you think it should, or you deliberately choose not to ask too many questions because you don't really want to know the answer in your heart. And there are times when you think you've been clear and other people misunderstand you. And that's not just something that happened way back thousands of years ago in Bible times. That's the kind of thing that happens on a daily, hourly, minute-by-minute basis here in our world. We're in the 21st century. We've got technology. Sometimes, depending upon when you were born and how much experience you've had with technology, the technology might be a little bit too much for you. Earlier today, I was out in the fellowship hall where our ladies group is meeting right now, and one of the ladies in our group was asked by another one, did you get my message? No. Did you check your voicemail? And she said, well, I never check my voicemail. I don't know how to retrieve messages. She's got a phone, The phone can do things for her, but if she doesn't know how to dial up the voicemail, she's missing out on communication. So they were sitting out there, and one of the younger women took the telephone and showed her how to find her messages and how to listen to voicemail and how to clean out. The voicemail is full of messages that she's never responded to. That's a miscommunication. People who sent the message on their end, they're assuming, I sent it, you must have gotten it. Why haven't you responded? They're assuming that she got the message. The reality is, she really didn't get the message. I mean, it was sitting there in her phone all this time, but she didn't have a way to retrieve it. Somebody else had to show her how to get messages, and some of those messages are from so far back that the only thing to do is just try to delete them rather than responding to them. Sometimes people assume that you've gotten a message that you haven't gotten, and then their attitude may change. Why didn't you respond back? Or why didn't you do what I asked you to do? Or how come I haven't heard back from you? Rather than making a second effort to go, hey, did you get my message? And sometimes even when we communicate, it doesn't always go through. This past week, I had a text message that came in where somebody was trying to send us a question for our Questions About God in the Bible podcast series. And when I don't see the name, I only see the telephone number, and it's not a number that I recognize. But the person who sent it sent a question, but they had an attachment with it. Well, I can see the voice, I can see the text message. But because I'm using a flip phone, I can see that there was an attachment, but it's too small for me to read, and I can't enlarge it on this phone. Sometimes people will send me messages and they'll attach something that's downloadable. Again, this is a flip phone. It's not the latest in technology. I mean, it survives and does the purpose of, I can get voicemails, I can get actual text messages, and I can make phone calls on it. But when it comes to things like downloading files and things, as maybe I could with a smarter phone, I can't open downloaded messages. And there are several friends that I've had to tell, sometimes more than once, hey, you sent me something that's downloadable. Remember, I have a flip phone. I didn't get your download. There's no way for me to open it. So they have to either email it to me, or they'll send me something through social media so that I can see it that way. A lot of times we let relationships get strained because we assume that the other person got our message and they just haven't responded, or they haven't responded back the way that we thought they should. When the person sent me the message and sent the attachment with it, I responded back and reminded her, hey, I can't open attachments. And her response back to that was, well, you said we could send you questions. Yes, you can call me. Yes, you can text me. You can email me the attachment, and I'll get it. But if you're trying to send me an attachment through this means, your phone can do things that my phone can't. So we had to straighten out a misunderstanding. When it comes to our lives as Christians, we have to be on the lookout for those communication hiccups where I think I've sent it, but you didn't receive it the same way that I thought you did. And we have to be on the lookout for not assuming that what we said, whichever way we chose to communicate it, in person, via text message, via voicemail, via letter, whatever means you've used, that the other person necessarily heard it the way we intended it. Relationships and communication take time and work. So part of our responsibility as Christians is to make sure that, first of all, we're keeping our communication line to God open by spending time in His Word, by participating in worship, by talking with other believers who can help us check ourselves out to make sure that we're doing what we really ought to be as believers in Christ. We can look for ways to try to communicate with other people and to really listen. You see, a lot of times the communication issue is, I want to tell you something, but I don't want to really hear your response. I'm planning my rebuttal for whatever it is I think you're going to say. That's not really communicating. Taking the time to listen. A lot of counselors would have fewer caseloads if people would learn to listen to God, to listen to each other, and to check their own communication methods to see if maybe their communication method isn't as clear as they thought. Thanks for watching.